I ran into my old best friend at the store. She hugged me, then weeks later, confessed she always wanted me. What? Hello, everyone. I apologize in advance if this narrative is lengthy, but I feel it is important to provide you with some context so that you can fully grasp my perspective. I am a 25-year-old female, and I have been best friends with someone I will refer to as Sandra, a pseudonym, who is 24 years old, since our elementary school days. We are extremely close. She is essentially like a sister to me, to the point where others often assume we are related. Despite our close bond, we bear no resemblance to each other, as I am biracial, and she is of Caucasian and Mexican descent. Throughout our friendship, there were periods when we lost touch, particularly after she left school unexpectedly during the 6th grade and never returned due to family issues. Sandra endured a challenging childhood. Her mother was absent, her father was frequently incarcerated, and her grandmother, who raised her, struggled with drug addiction. It was Sandra and her younger brother, Jay. In contrast, my early life involved my mother working tirelessly to make ends meet, and although we could not always afford what we desired, her boyfriend, who is my brother's father, had financial resources. Consequently, every Christmas would bring us our longed-for gifts. In 2016, my mother graduated with a nursing degree, which touched off a phase where she quietly indulged us. We often had the latest iPhones and similar items, but we were never wealthy. Even then, Sandra and I maintained our friendship, even after she and her family moved an hour away and started at a different school. We kept in contact through phone calls and Snapchat whenever she was able. Once again, she had a very difficult life. Every summer, she would come to stay at my house for 2 weeks, leading to joyful times filled with posting on Vine, creating amusing Snapchat videos, and introducing me to Instagram, where I gained many of her followers due to her social nature. While she was popular in high school, I was well-liked too as a member of the cheer team, but I preferred a more solitary approach, almost like a loner within the popular crowd. One day during one of Sandra's visits, while we were in my room doing our hair and taking pictures, my mom entered and announced that we would be heading to Jacksonville, Florida, to visit family. Sandra was invited to join us, and we were both thrilled. It would be our first trip to Florida together. Eventually, we arrived and enjoyed ourselves. However, midway through the trip, she began to act cold and distant towards me. I had no clue what was troubling her, and when I asked if everything was all right, she said she was just tired. She continued to maintain this distant behavior the next day, even towards my brother. The negative energy was so palpable that my aunt even inquired of my mom, "What is up with the kids?" I cannot recall much from the trip aside from her chilly demeanor towards everyone. After a lengthy 16-hour drive back to our home state, I do not remember her reaction during the return, but that night at my mother's house, as we relaxed in my bed watching the show, Baggage, I began to feel tired, and we decided to sleep. I felt her cuddling close to me, wrapping her arms around me. I assumed she needed comfort, and that cuddling brought her some peace. Fast forward to 6 years later, I welcomed my first daughter in February 2020, and at that time, Sandra and I were not in touch for reasons I cannot recall. Although she congratulated me on my pregnancy, she was absent during the gender reveal, the birth, and even when it came to giving a gift, like a sweet godmother present. In March 2020, she began dating a girl I will refer to as Polly. Polly seemed decent initially, but during our hangouts, she appeared envious of Sandra and me. Sandra invited me over to meet Polly so we could all establish a connection. I welcomed this, and we hit it off, exchanged numbers and Snapchat contacts, and enjoyed each other's company during our fun adventures. They stayed for several hours before leaving. In July 2020, I ended my relationship with my daughter's father and moved back into my mother's home. I suspected he had been unfaithful after discovering a MAC makeup brush under the coffee table, something I didn't use, nor did Sandra, as she rarely wore makeup unless I did it for her. After moving back, Sandra helped me transport my furniture with a U-Haul, and we drove together while my brother and his friend followed in my car. Later that night at my mother's house, we invited Polly over to hang out in the car and smoke. My daughter was peacefully asleep in my room, and my mother was also in my bedroom watching Netflix, unaware of what we were doing since I didn't think she would approve when I was already 21. After half an hour, we returned inside after Polly left, and Sandra and I discussed everything from religion to food in my bed before we eventually fell asleep. Fast forward to September 2020. I had not seen Sandra since she assisted in my move out of my ex-boyfriend's apartment. We communicated through text and Snapchat, but that was about it. One day, out of the blue, I received a Snapchat message from Sandra stating, "I don't think we should be friends anymore. I have a lot going on in my life and feel it would be best to stop communicating. I will also be blocking you," I replied, asking if I had done something wrong or if there was a specific reason. My message was opened, and then I was blocked. I was utterly heartbroken and confused about why our friendship had suddenly ended. 3 years later, I am now engaged and have faced numerous challenges, in addition to welcoming my second daughter. One day, while scrolling through Facebook, I stumbled upon Sandra's name and shared my discovery with my fiancé, who had only heard of Sandra but never met her. I frequently reminisced about our shared memories, and despite the abrupt end to our friendship that left me unsettled, I held her in high regard. My fiancé, whom I will call Tyler, suggested that I reach out to her to send a friend request and seek closure on what happened. However, I hesitated and did not send a request. While fueling my car at a local store, I unexpectedly saw her Sandra working at the front register. I contemplated switching to the second register, which was empty, but as I approached, a staff member informed me that the cashier would attend to me at the first register, the one Sandra was at. I was left with no option but to engage with Sandra. She looked surprised and pleased to see me, even coming out from behind the counter to hug me. I was taken aback, unsure how to react, considering I thought she harbored negative feelings toward me. We engaged in light conversation, asking about life and whether she and Polly were still together. To my surprise, they were. After I paid for my gas, I left the store and continued my day. Later that evening, I informed Tyler about my encounter with Sandra. He inquired how she had acted upon seeing me, and I responded that she seemed shockingly delighted. It felt strange. Despite this encounter, I still did not send her a friend request on Facebook, as I continued to feel perplexed and uneasy. Days passed, and I was notified of a friend request from Sandra on Facebook. Upon reviewing her profile, I saw she was now in a relationship, but with a man. I must mention that I was aware Sandra identified as bisexual. She had come out to my family when she was 18 and had predominantly been with women until then, making this new development surprising. I accepted her request, and she immediately texted me on Messenger. We engaged in conversation and caught up, and I asked, "What happened with you and Polly?" She explained that they just didn't work out. A few days later, I asked Tyler if it would be all right for me to invite Sandra over so we could spend time together and catch up, introducing her to him, as I believed they would get along well. He agreed and suggested inviting his cousin for a bonfire night, requiring that our daughter would stay with one of our parents. I concurred, and we planned for our daughter's care. I picked up Sandra since she didn't have a car, and Tyler's cousin came over in his truck since we live in rural Louisiana. Tyler's mother picked up our daughter, allowing Sandra and me to return to my house. We set up a fire, connected our phone to the Bluetooth speaker, and shared a few beers except for the cousin, who needed to drive back home. We had a lovely time talking and catching up. During our chat, Sandra disclosed that her relationship with Polly had ended due to Polly's abusive and toxic behavior, which escalated to the point where her family had to intervene. She expressed her distress over losing weight and not eating properly, and I assured her that her feelings were valid. Eventually, I asked the pressing question that had haunted me for years. "Why did you end our friendship so abruptly?" She responded, "Polly was not just toxic and abusive, but that behavior manifested later after I severed our friendship because Polly was extremely jealous of you, considering we were friends long before she entered my life. She often claimed that I shouldn't have attractive friends. I was taken aback, yet I could see that coming. I just sought closure." She then spoke about her new partner, whom I will refer to as Terry, praising him for being wonderful and adding that they were actively trying for a baby. Tyler, for his part, asked, "Wait, how long have you been together?" Sandra replied, 3 months. Having only known someone for 3 months, and considering starting a family struck me as recklessly fast. I shared my observation that she may want to take things slower, as bringing a child into the world creates a lifelong bond. I recounted my own experience of becoming a parent without being engaged, resulting in a complicated custody battle that has caused significant strain on my own daughter, who is only 4 years old. I advised her to consider what she truly wanted for her baby and to take her time. She should relish her youth, make lasting memories, and truly get to know her partner. She, however, insisted that she was steadfast in her decision to have a baby soon. Fast forward a month, Tyler was arrested for various reasons, prompting me to move my daughters and myself into a more spacious, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home. Court matters were heating up, thus I wanted everyone to have their own space in case I won custody. My daughter was thrilled when she chose her room, and we enjoyed shopping for decorations and bath soaps. My home was fully furnished, and sometimes my mother would stay over, enjoying nights of watching Grey's Anatomy. On occasion, so would Sandra. One day in July 2024, Sandra sent me a text with an image attached. When I opened it, I was greeted by 3 positive pregnancy tests. Initially, I was excited for her, but then reality set in, prompting me to hold back my emotions. A week or so later, we arranged to hang out again. I picked her up, and we prepared a meal at my house. My older daughter was staying over at my mother's, while my youngest, only 11 months at the time, was present. We had a great time cooking party wings and fries. As Sandra enjoyed holding my baby and laughing, their moment of joy was interrupted when Sandra's phone rang. She placed my baby down and walked away to take the call. Unfortunately, as soon as she answered, her joyful expression changed to one of grief. I sensed she had received distressing news, so I placed my baby in her crib, turned on Miss Rachel, and returned to comfort Sandra. She was curled up on my living room floor in agony, and after sitting beside her, she broke the news that Terry had been arrested for fleeing from an officer while driving at 120 mph. She expressed her anxiety over her family's future, and I consoled her while we had dinner and ultimately called it a night. When bedtime came, Sandra opted to sleep on the couch since I did not have a guest bed and preferred to keep my daughter's space exclusive to her. I awoke in the middle of the night to Sandra tapping my foot, and in a half-asleep daze, I heard her ask if she could join me in bed. Tired, I consented, falling back asleep quickly. Moments later, I was stirred awake by a familiar yet unexpected feeling, one I had only experienced with Tyler. Awakening, I found Sandra with her hand in my shirt. Confused and embarrassed, I exclaimed, "What are you doing?" She quickly retracted her hand, her expression mirroring my shock. Sandra expressed that she had always found me attractive, and that upon meeting Tyler back at our old house, she had nearly succumbed to the urge to take me into a room and confine me to her affections. She implied that she wished to be with me rather than Tyler, professing that she had always loved me but didn't know how I would respond. While we affectionately expressed love as friends, I identified as straight and neither bisexual nor lesbian. I insisted that she return to the couch and not come back into my room. She retreated to the living room, and I grabbed my baby and locked my door to prevent her from entering again. As I lay awake in bed, I struggled to process what had just transpired. Why had she acted this way after being emotionally distraught earlier that evening? Did I just experience an unwelcome advance from my pregnant friend? There was no way that could have happened. The following morning, I concocted a flimsy excuse to end her visit by telling her, "My baby wants me to stay the night at my mom's house," fully aware that my infant could not verbally communicate. I informed Tyler about what occurred, describing it as being subjected to an unwanted advance by a pregnant woman. Naturally, I shared that it was Sandra who initiated it. He was furious and urged me to sever ties with her out of respect for our relationship, asserting that she had crossed a line. I concurred and proceeded to block her on all social media platforms, including text messages. At times, I even contemplated changing my phone number to prevent any potential harassment from her using a new number. I felt utterly revolted. Sandra was aware of my past trauma regarding sexual assault at the hands of my older cousin when I was just 6. I had put my trust in her, and she had shattered a significant part of my childhood, leaving me in an emotional void for years. Experiencing such betrayal from my best friend resurfaced painful memories, amplifying the trauma of my past. 5 months later, my counselor and I have discussed my ordeal, but I feel she has not provided much support. Tyler is set to return home in 5 months, and I want to focus on healing to avoid transferring my trauma to him when we share intimate moments. After several months of keeping Sandra blocked, I discovered that her baby was due at the end of the following month. In a moment of weakness, I contemplated visiting her in the hospital when she gave birth. However, reflecting on it now, I question why I should extend that kindness. She was absent for my children's births, and her actions towards me were entirely unacceptable. I have forgiven her in my heart, as I believe that forgiveness is essential to free oneself from resentment. This forgiveness, however, does not imply that we will rekindle our friendship. It is merely a way for me to move forward with a clear conscience. Though I have yet to express my forgiveness directly to her, I have engaged in self-reflection, communicating my feelings as if she were facing me and conveying how her actions hurt me, ultimately leading to my decision to forgive her. Am I the one at fault for choosing not to support her during her hospital stay when her baby arrives? Story 2. I struggled with overwhelming codependency in my friendship, only to realize it felt more like a toxic marriage than a bond, pushing me to reset. I became friends with her towards the end of our first year of college, where our interactions were primarily limited to sharing lunch and drinking boba. Now that we are in our senior year, our relationship has spiraled out of control after a period as close neighbors, having been roommates for a year in the same cramped 250-square-foot double room, and currently living next door in the same suite. She is a genuinely good person who cares deeply, perhaps too deeply, about me. We have confided in each other over the years to the extent that I now harbor significant regret about some of the things I disclosed. I also feel shame regarding the knowledge I possess about her. During our junior year, when we were roommates, we would engage in discussions that sometimes lasted up to 8 hours, finally wrapping up our conversations at 6, 7, or even 8 a.m., just chatting about anything and everything. When we decided to be roommates out of necessity due to a lack of available single rooms, I was confident everything would work out after all. I felt a strong connection with her. As a gay man, and given our deep discussions up to that point, I had no reason to suspect that there were deeper feelings on her part, especially from an asexual woman who had never experienced romantic feelings before. Around November 2023, midway through our junior year, I confronted her about a comment she made a few weeks earlier regarding having an idea of what unrequited love feels like. I understood she was alluding to me. She confessed that she had developed feelings for me and had spent the preceding summer trying to eliminate those feelings, claiming they were now completely gone. We attempted to move past it, but I felt deceived that someone aware of their crush on me would choose to share a living space with me. A few months later, she confessed to a mutual friend who later felt obligated to disclose this to me that she had noticed I appeared more muscular and still felt attracted to me, her own gay roommate. I approached that friend again, pleading for the full truth, but she denied it, and I expressed my disbelief, stating it would take time for me to trust her again. I attempted to establish boundaries, asking her to cease constantly tracking my location. Despite her insistence on using Find My Friends to know when I was in our room so she could change or whatever. Stop messaging me every fleeting thought, stop expressing jealousy when I made plans without her, and so on. She would often call me out for valid reasons. I occasionally forgot our plans or failed to respect her time. I apologized for those oversights, but also pointed out that we were sharing a room and spending virtually all our time together. We were also involved in the same music groups on campus, where we rehearsed frequently, shared the same close friends, and engaged in numerous other activities together. I felt utterly overwhelmed by our friendship. She constantly did things for me, such as buying gifts and food, and insisted she required nothing in return, yet I felt tremendous guilt for everything she was doing for me, particularly since she knew I was financially struggling and depressed at that time. This is where the codependency surfaced. I was in therapy throughout all of this, and my therapist consistently urged me to reassess the boundaries in our friendship, but they would inevitably weaken as my guilt increased. My friend and I spent countless hours discussing mental health and the nature of our friendship, which began to feel like an immense dragon consuming our lives. In December 2023, when I expressed my depression and inability to function, she mentioned she enjoyed seeing me in that state because it meant she could spend more time with me in the room. I broke down in tears upon hearing that. Essentially, she revealed she did not want me to be independent and leave her. Additionally, she consistently raised anxieties about me possibly ending our friendship one day, asking me to guarantee it would last forever, which I did. During common areas, she would engage me in conversations for 3 hours straight, leaving me feeling trapped. It wasn't until recently that I started asserting boundaries like, "I'm bored and going to bed." I still feel a considerable amount of guilt over that. I was, and continue to be, grappling with my own struggles against depression and anxiety, and her insecurities and constant breakdowns in our shared space, rushing to rehearsals and frantically searching for lost items only exacerbated my situation. In April 2024, we essentially entered a no-contact phase. I told her that in shared spaces, we should only discuss absolutely necessary topics. She should not text me unless it was vital, and I suggested we should only hang out if we were invited to the same event by a mutual friend. While it was challenging for her, it felt liberating for me. I felt as though I gained control of my life again. However, she began to slip back into my life by joining an organization I was already part of, despite her previous lack of interest. Suddenly, she was showing up at all the events for this organization. Towards the end of the semester, I began planning a trip to my hometown with another mutual friend, which she had already attended the previous year, and felt resistant about her joining, given the boundaries I set. A wave of guilt washed over me because of the expectations she placed on me. The trip went well, but my mother noted that she seemed obsessed with me. Even my grandmother commented on it, teasing us for her behavior. Neither of them likes her because they can see how distracted and erratic she is, clearly trying to influence my actions. Now, regarding her obsession with me, she will vehemently deny it, but she follows my every move. My cultural heritage is relatively small and underrepresented, and I enjoyed sharing aspects of it with her. Suddenly, she starts listening to the music I introduced her to. I mention a song I like, and it instantly becomes her favorite. I express a desire to visit a certain place, and suddenly it becomes her dream destination. I have a professor whom I greatly admire, and after I mentioned my interactions with her, she signs up for the introductory class the following semester, extolling how she talks with her after class. I began studying a new language, and upon seeing my enthusiasm, she decides to learn it too, despite not showing any previous interest. I traveled to a new country, my first international trip, and shared my wonderful experience with her, only for her to decide she wants to go there for spring break. I mentioned I was going to a new city with my mother, and suddenly she posts on her Instagram story about affordable train tickets to that city, something she had never previously mentioned, which is now on her bucket list. All of these instances are quite recent. Then, this summer, she claimed to have undergone serious self-reflection and insisted that she is no longer the person she used to be. Due to my forgiving nature, I chose to trust her. I attempted to establish new ground in our friendship, but it became overwhelmingly draining. I feel emotionally depleted by her constantly, and group gatherings rarely feel spontaneous because I am always aware of what she might be thinking. I'm contemplating turning our planned trip for spring break with her and 3 others into a complete solo journey, as I can't bear being around her anymore. Last semester, I only attended a small portion of a concert where she was a featured soloist. All her friends were present, but I could only make it for the final 10 minutes, as she had made it seem like the timing was flexible and not a big deal. She also knew well in advance that I had to organize and manage a party for over 60 people in our suite, and was solely responsible for all the preparation. I also had arranged to take photos with another friend group that did not involve her, which caused me to be late for her performance. We have many performances each semester, and I usually make an effort to attend hers when I can. However, this particular instance just didn't synchronize with my schedule, and I had communicated that I might be shaky regarding plans and timing due to my own mental health challenges. Later at the party, I congratulated her because I honestly didn't believe there was any issue and thought she would recognize my efforts to make it as much as I could. Yet, she shot me a side eye and retreated to her room to complain about me to our mutual friend. I interrupted them and confronted her directly about her anger towards me. She responded, "The one event I expected you to attend and you miss." She then went on to share that after the concert, which was a considerable success, she cried with 2 friends who came to support her from out of state. I experienced anger, guilt, sadness, and ultimately broke down mentally in front of her and our mutual friend, sobbing for hours. It was heart-wrenching. I missed the entirety of the end-of-year celebration I had helped organize in order to engage in an 8-hour conversation with her about our friendship's nature and how this series of events was symptomatic of a deeper issue. I told her that she focused solely on our friendship, neglecting me as a person or as her friend. Supposedly, this deeply resonated with her, and I hoped she would understand, leading to an improvement in our friendship. However, now her impatience and anger seemed to be escalating. When I distanced myself from her for a month, I found a newfound sense of self-respect and could engage in self-reflection. I established firm boundaries and began to be open about my feelings. I expressed that her anger made me uncomfortable. A few weeks ago, she loudly confronted a security guard denying us access to a library at night, which made me quite uneasy. I articulated my discomfort and asked her if she had ever considered whether she had anger issues, to which she agreed. I am currently in therapy, as is she, and about to begin psychiatric medication to regain my functionality, but I find myself questioning the role of this friendship in my life. She understands me more than anyone else and knows things about me that no one else does. I've never emotionally experienced as much with another person. I cherish our conversations, as we can exchange thoughts and jokes for hours without losing momentum. We share our most unrestrained thoughts and laughter. Yet, it distracts me from my daily life and feels overwhelming due to everything we have endured. It resembles more of a marriage of 10 years rather than a mere friendship. When I am not with her, I feel closer to my true self and can concentrate on my personal goals. I am now more adept at maintaining boundaries, but if I genuinely do not want to be around her at this moment and recognize that she distracts me from my objectives, I feel uncertain about what course of action to take. Thank you for taking the time to read this. I truly appreciate your attention. In summary, a codependent friendship has turned toxic. I feel confined and am contemplating whether my feelings toward her will ever evolve, despite appreciating the intellectual contributions our friendship has offered. Or possibly, as I reconsider, whether it was merely emotional manipulation, providing avoidance from my real life and its challenges. I am uncertain whether she will alter her behavior and whether I should continue this friendship, terminate it entirely, or reassess it and implement stricter boundaries. Story 3. I won $30K at a casino, felt invincible, then spiraled into losing my entire life savings and owe taxes on non-existent gains. This might be a detailed account, as I am going to explain how I transitioned from the happiness of my previous life to a state of turmoil and my current situation. I am a 38-year-old male who at one time had accumulated over $500,000 in a retirement fund, along with more than $100,000 in my checking account. To begin, I am aware many of you may be curious about how I found myself in such a position, so let me provide some context. I am a professional in information technology, with experience in software engineering, although I am currently in a management role. I have earned a 6-figure salary since my late 20s. I tend to be quite economical, saving significantly more than the average individual, and I do not indulge in many extravagant purchases. I prefer to keep to myself most of the time, occasionally go out, and prioritize quality in the products I use, avoiding excess. This approach has allowed me to lead a generally happy and successful life, where I never had to worry about job security, let alone where my next meal would come from. I always felt reassured that if a major crisis arose, I had enough funds to sustain myself for years. I have always enjoyed the occasional trip to the casino, likely more than my friends, but it was never an issue for me until the middle of last year. I was an occasional gambler, mostly playing parlor table games, when one day I entered a casino with $600 and joined a game of Ultimate Texas Hold'em. To my astonishment, I began winning continuously for several hours. I continually raised my bets and kept winning. Eventually, I reached the maximum table bet of $3,000 across various wagers. This drew attention to the table, and I was experiencing a rush. Everyone at the table was winning as the dealer was struggling, but I was winning the most. I secured a straight, followed by a full house, then another straight and another full house. I was making maximum bets, raising my stakes 4 times, blind. without even looking at my cards, yet I would still win, sometimes with just a high card. I simply could not lose. The others at the table were cheering me on, and whenever I would win another $2,000 or so, I would generously give out $100 chips to others at the table. The largest chips available were $500, and they had to reorder them multiple times, specifically 6 times. To avoid drawing too much attention, I discreetly placed the $500 chips into my pockets and only played with those on the table, keeping any new winnings hidden from view. At one point, they decided to change the cards, which took around 20 minutes, so I excused myself to the restroom. I was anxious that my pants would sag under the weight of the chips. They filled my pockets so much that I feared they might fall out. I later learned that the pit bosses were receiving calls from security, instructing them to monitor me due to suspicions of cheating. The security team reportedly reviewed footage from that night for days to assess the situation. When I finally left the table, I had won over $30,000 from my initial $600 investment. I experienced a high I had never imagined. I could afford to buy a car with that, or truly anything I desired, but I already had everything I wanted. Ultimately, the $30,000 felt irrelevant. I discovered later that my significant betting over an extended period had elevated my tier status to the highest level, bringing many perks such as a complimentary cruise, free golf outings at a local private club, and over $3,000 in food credits at even the upscale restaurant options within the casino. I ended up treating my friends to several lavish dinners using this money. With no items I wished to spend money on, I decided to return the following weekend. This time, I played slots and various table games, once again winning more. Everything I touched turned into a win. The slots were delivering, hand pays, continuously. People recognized me and would stop to hear the tale of my previous success. Over the course of the month, I won another $20,000, mainly from the slots, with wagers between $5 and $60 per spin. It was all cash literal paper money stored in my closet in $10,000 stacks, simply sitting there without any purpose other than for future casino trips. My friends frequently commented on how fortunate I was and enjoyed sharing the story. Everyone loves a narrative about outsmarting the casino. My friends were aware that I had approximately $50,000 in cash in my closet. I had recently purchased a house and was beginning renovations, spending about $40,000 on improvements like paint, appliances, and flooring. While spending that money, I ensured I paid with my card, saving the cash for later casino ventures. However, in the following weeks, I gradually lost more of that $50,000 cash reserve, which dwindled to $40,000, then to $35,000. I kept thinking, oh no, if my friends ask to see the cash, I will need an excuse for why I no longer have it. I should probably try to win some back at the tables. I recognized the absurdity of this thought, as you do now. Eventually, my mother came to visit. She lives in a state without casinos and enjoys visiting them. She frequently mentioned her eagerness to experience the casino and witness my success firsthand. I felt compelled to fabricate a reason for why I didn't possess the full amount I had previously shared in my stories. I felt guilty and embarrassed lying about something seemingly trivial, like losing $15,000, but I didn't want anyone to know that I had given some back. Succumbing to this feeling of shame and my willingness to hide it would ultimately lead to my downfall. After my mother departed, I lacked anyone who could hold me accountable. The casino offered me $250 every week and $250 every weekend in complimentary play. I began visiting the casino twice weekly to collect the free play. Of course, but given my betting habits of sometimes wagering $10 to $50 per spin, that money could vanish in mere minutes. Once exhausted, I would find myself at the cashier withdrawing $3,000 at a time, an amount that the atoms did not allow me to take out. I repetitively lost money. Week after week, I would lose $3,000 or even $10,000. One day, I noticed my banking app indicated, "You spent $30,000 less so far this month than last month," and my heart sank. I understood I needed to stop, and I would, but I just required one more decent betting day to recover maybe $20,000 to $30,000 out of the now missing $60,000 to $80,000, and I would cut my losses there. This flawed logic propelled me for months as I spiraled. I ceased visiting the casino altogether, and gradually the temptation faded. A few months later, I discovered online casinos. I assumed they were all illegal or did not accept United States customers until I found one that did. I deposited a few $100s and began playing slots and table games from the comfort of my bed at night. The ease of depositing money directly from my bank account into a slot machine was incredibly tempting. Tempting. Eventually, I lost everything in my savings. I felt empty, devoid of emotion. The thoughts of, "What's another $10,000 at this stage?" began to infiltrate my mind. I used a credit card to test whether it would work, and to my disappointment, it did. I maxed out my credit card, hoping to win enough to pay it off. When I reached the limit, I requested an increase, which was approved, and then I maxed it out again. Out of options, I decided to withdraw funds from my Roth individual retirement account into my personal account. The first transfer took less than 20 minutes. I felt guilty. A rush of anxiety and thrill washed over me as I immediately deposited that money into the online casino. I turned $10,000 into $0 within hours. I began making smaller deposits of $1,000 because that felt reasonable and less money. Yet I would lose that too and repeat the cycle moments later again. Small, reasonable increment. When bills came due, I lacked the funds to cover them, so I rationalized another withdrawal from my retirement account. This time it was, to pay bills. I really need this. I withdrew far more than required for the bills and squandered the extra. During this period, there were moments when I transformed $100 into $20,000 or $1,000 into $10,000 in mere minutes as well. The sporadic winning kept me hooked. If I could convert $100 into $20,000, just imagine what I could do with $1,000. I could regain it all. I continued withdrawing from my retirement account until I had taken out so much that the remaining balance would not even cover the taxes I now owed from the income and penalties for early withdrawals. I felt so much shame that I did not want anyone to learn about this situation. I kept it to myself. My closest friends are all affluent like I once was, but without a massive hole in their finances. It became increasingly difficult to keep up with social activities such as dining out and golfing. My new house lacked even basic furniture necessary for hosting guests. There was no substantial sofa, no proper dining table. It became increasingly tough to rationalize to my friends why I hadn't hosted anyone and why I had not purchased a couch or basic furnishings. The overwhelming guilt and anxiety regarding my impending tax responsibilities compelled me to confess to my best friend. I regret not speaking up sooner, as it could have spared my future. I am still grappling with shock over my actions. All of this transpired within a single year, with the majority occurring in the last 6 months. I have since completely halted my gambling. I have created a budget plan and established a strategy to address my tax obligations while moving forward with my life. Discussing this with my friend provided clarity. In retrospect, it feels as though I was mired in a deep fog of depression, lacking clarity and disregarding my own well-being. It all transpired so quickly. I will face the consequences of these actions for the remainder of my life, but the coming months and years will likely be the most challenging as I work to pay off the debt I foolishly accumulated and strive to rebuild my life. I hope this account serves as a cautionary tale for everyone. Do not gamble, for winning might end up being the worst thing that ever occurs to you. Summary: I won a tremendous amount of money through gambling, then attempted to replicate that experience repeatedly until I became financially depleted. I withdrew funds from my retirement account to maintain appearances, and now I owe income taxes on all of that money, which has since vanished into the casino's coffers. Story 4. I found out my ex recorded me naked and blackmailed me, then tried to blame me for our breakup while stalking my new friends. What? Hello, I am new to Reddit and I am filled with resentment towards my ex. Please do not suggest that I still have feelings for him, as my hatred is very strong. Let me explain how it all began. I first met him in high school while we were both in our senior year. He was actually a year ahead of me. He had a few friends in my class, so I would see him occasionally, although we weren't close back then. At the time, I enjoyed chatting with various guys, seeking attention rather than anything serious. I switched schools partway through the year, and on arrival, I posted about it on social media. He messaged me, asking if I had left, and we began talking a little. I mentioned that I was interested in him, even though I wasn't truly feeling that way. I suppose I was just eager to have a serious boyfriend since he was older and might be more mature. He expressed disbelief over my interest, but we continued our conversations. Eventually, I made it clear that I wanted a serious relationship. If he didn't feel the same, we should part ways. He claimed that he wanted a committed relationship as well, so we decided to give it a try and talked for about 3 months. Things took a turn during our video chats when I noticed he was conversing with another girl about accompanying her to her terminal after class. I inquired who she was and what they were discussing, and he concocted a weak excuse about wanting to ask her about schoolwork. This girl turned out to be his ex. I chose not to blame her since she was not at fault, and I remembered she didn't even respond to his messages. I forgave him after asking him to be honest about his feelings. Unfortunately, he admitted to still having feelings for her, but claimed he would never get back together with her. I decided to let it go, believing that any relationship would fail if I gave up at that moment. So we became officially together after 3 months. That's when the real problems started, as we entered a long-distance relationship. We often video chatted, but he started wanting constant communication. Even while I was in class or busy with chores, he demanded my attention. I tried to express my need for personal space as I had my own life to manage. When he was busy, I would assume he was occupied with something important. However, things worsened when he began contacting my sister and mother, asking where I was and what I was doing. My sister informed me this wasn't normal behavior. I had already told him I would be busy and unable to respond right away. Despite this, he would still reach out to them, expressing his worry due to my apparent lack of response. My sister initially brushed it off as concern but grew annoyed over time, especially when he would text her during our arguments, asking her to convince me to unblock him. Finally, she blocked him. There was a plethora of other issues. He insisted I should only focus on him, and I tried explaining that maintaining individuality was healthy in a relationship. I continually provided him with reassurance, yet he still didn't grasp the concept. Our tumultuous relationship continued this way until I ultimately decided to break things off. During our long-distance relationship, we would share intimate moments over video chat. Prior to this, I reiterated that I didn't want any pictures or videos taken of me, and he agreed. This becomes relevant later. Still at that time, I loved him. An opportunity arose for me to return to the city, which I accepted since I was struggling to adapt to my new life in the province. Once I returned, we rekindled our relationship. He had started college, while I was still finishing my senior year in a different school. He would pick me up after school and meet me beforehand. He influenced me negatively, and I realized I enabled him. We regularly skipped classes to be together, and both of us were suffering academically. Once, while hanging out at a cafe with bunks for lounging, I noticed some videos of me in his hidden gallery videos he had screen recorded from our calls. It shattered my trust in him, as I had explicitly stated my discomfort with being recorded. Initially, he apologized and deleted them, but I was too devastated to respond. He refused to let me leave, even preventing me from attending class. After much hesitation, he allowed me to go. I was in shock and isolated from my classmates due to my frequent absences. Following that incident, I knew I wanted to end the relationship. Weeks later, during a group project at the beach, I found myself having to cover expenses. When I reached out to him for some assistance, he accused me of staying in a drive-in hotel due to a photo I sent from a gas station bathroom. Furious at his allegations, I snapped back at him. He then contacted a girl from my class to inquire about my project group and their identities, suspecting I was asking for money. That was the final straw for me. I restricted him on social media since I felt he had no respect for me or my boundaries. Eventually, I formed friendships with the classmates involved in the project, including the girl he had contacted and another girl alongside a guy who had intervened previously. After our breakup, I was welcomed into their circle. While perusing previous conversations in their group chat, I found a screenshot C had sent of my ex discussing me, implying I was asking him for money. C insisted not to inform me of his inquiry, while A and K clarified the context of the situation. Although I felt embarrassment, I was grateful for their support in downplaying his actions. After ending the relationship, I resumed my studies, feeling liberated. However, he later transferred to my school, which infuriated me. I learned from mutual friends that he had been expelled from his university, a fact that angered me further. Despite my irritation to see him increasingly trying to interact with my classmates, they were already aware of our history and showed no interest in befriending him. I eventually grew indifferent to his presence. My anger stems from his continued claims that I was the reason for our breakup, labeling me as a red flag or a cheater, and implying I was the one at fault. Our mutual friends recognized that he was indeed the issue, not me. While he was blocked, he bombarded me with messages professing his love and threatening self-harm, along with overly dramatic remarks about going to heaven, which I found absurd and shared with my friends. He even sent an email, since I had blocked him on other platforms, accusing me of cheating and demanding the truth. It was alarming, and I posted it publicly because I found his behavior pathetic. I suspect he started a new relationship after transferring, and I observed his new partner displaying a haughty attitude. While I harbor no ill feelings towards her and genuinely hope she finds happiness, I am immensely relieved to be rid of his erratic behavior. By the way, he's not particularly attractive. He has a lazy eye. The lesson here is that women should not believe they can change someone simply because they think they are mature enough to handle the complexities of that individual. It's best to choose someone who is already emotionally mature and stable. This is my rant. Feel free to comment as you wish, but please refrain from justifying his behavior.